Really interesting is that both Elizabeth and I have been understanding of the reality of our Darwinian vision of evolution is actually a very destructive philosophy and is responsible for a lot of the problems that we're experiencing today. And then, of course, the idea if you challenge Darwin in today's world, they go, what? He's the God, Newton, Darwin, and Westminster Abbey, of course, and all that. And who are we? But Elizabeth and I have really come from a really modern perspective of modern biology, cell biology, and all that to come up with new insights and understanding. And so I'm so honored to be with Elizabeth. Why? Because without her, I was out there talking alone like, what, you crazy anti-Darwin guy? I go, yeah. But now I know there's two crazy anti-Darwin people here. And so I'd just like to acknowledge how happy I am that I have a colleague that recognizes the same thing, that we are deeply involved in this evolution process. So now I have to be quiet for a second and let my dear friend Elizabeth take charge. Please, darling.
Hey, Bruce, I'm not taking charge. We're having a dialogue, that's all. So I love that, Bruce, that you're on the path to your beach and I'm on your beach. I took this picture years ago visiting Bruce and Margaret. And long before that, Bruce and I used to sit in the Santa Cruz Mountains or go to Seth conferences together to give
Yes.
talks, because both of us were very, very influenced by the worldviews of that discarnate entity who used the name Seth as Jane Roberts was allowing him to come through her for years in those many books, because it still holds up as about the best complete worldview ever, even to the point where he was talking about viruses in the most sensible ways back in the 70s as a discarnate entity. So he covered everything, biology included. And one of the things, Bruce, that's been on my mind is, we all kind of wonder, what is it with humanity that it can't get with the program of nature? And what occurs to me is, when the big brain suddenly exploded in genetic history, what happened was that we gained freedom of choice, but at the expense of knowing what to do, because every other creature is not just communicating, but they're in communion constantly. The cells within their bodies are communing with each other, as ours do, or we wouldn't last very long. If they didn't know what each other were doing, if we weren't a superorganism in that sense, and if they weren't knowing what every other species in their ecosystem is doing, this communion, this direct transmission of information, the trees do it, all the plants do it, all the natural animals do it. Probably our domesticated animals have lost it the way we've lost it, but this trade-off of freedom of choice, meaning that we have to figure out how to find mates, how to govern ourselves, what gender to be even now, right? It's that wide open for us. And that comes with a huge responsibility, that freedom of choice, of figuring out how to conduct ourselves by learning from the rest of nature, which we have had the arrogance to just reject and say, no, we're above all that, we're better than, we're superior, we know that.
We're so smart. We're so smart, and they're not. I love it because they always say everything less than human is less intelligent, less intelligent. And then you talk about a cell, and they go, "Oh, a cell." What and I go, cells created us with technologies that humans don't even have today, and we're looking down at them. And the fact is, they're smarter than we are. And so I think both Elisabet and I have really gotten into this by really looking at other species and organisms and the evolution of these organisms coming up from the bottom. If I just then, stimulate Elisabet here with my little thing, I'll just say right now, and that is simply this. All you have to do is, surf the web, watch the news, even look out your window, and you can see that this whole planet is in chaos everywhere, whether it's racial, religious, economic, social, political. It's in chaos. It's like, what a coincidence. I go, it's not a coincidence. The fact is simply this fact, that human civilization has precipitated what we call the sixth mass extinction of life. That includes us. And so human behavior is so out of balance with nature. And we have such a powerful influence that if we don't get it right, we can destroy everything around us, which is what we're doing. So the symptoms that we see out here in the world today are not punishments. They're sort of like nature saying, wake up. Wake up. You guys are killing yourself because you've lost something. And I think if we just go back and say, look, Judeo-Christian biblical story, all of the planet was created and then humans were added at the very end like an option. Let's just add some humans to this. And that separated us from nature. And then that biblical story led to, oh, we have dominion over all of life. And that didn't change when science came in, because in the founding of science in 1650, Francis Bacon set up the mission statement of science, and that is to dominate and control nature. I go, well, how's that working out? I go, yeah, we're dying, and nature is trying to say to wake up. The whole idea of competition, and that version of competition where it's winner loser, the kind we have today, this is self-destructive, totally self-destructive. A garden, by definition, is not a battleground. A garden, by definition, is a height of cooperation. And we've been looking at the world through Darwinian lenses. I said, it's a competition, survival of the fittest, struggle, fight, who's going to be the winner? And it's like, that is anti-evolution. And Elisabet and I have really recognized that, no, fundamental is the complete opposite behavior, and that is cooperation, learning to work together in harmony, that all humans are cells coming together in a bigger cooperation to create a bigger organism called humanity. That's our destination. And before I just pass it back to my dear friend Elisabet, who's sitting there probably ready to say a million things now, I'll just add this really last important part about that, and that is we have, through a Darwinian perspective, looked at evolution on a metric of genes. We are so much more complex and simple organisms. We must have hundreds of thousands of genes. Actually, that's what they thought when they did the Human Genome Project. There was over 100,000 genes, and that was going to measure evolution. The higher up the evolutionary tree, the more genes. And now that we've done genome projects, it turns out humans don't have any more genes than one of the most primitive organisms on a planet. A 1,250 cell organism has the same number of genes as humans, which means, first of all, genetics is not the metric of evolution. And as we understand it, and Elisabet and I agree, I hope, on this, that consciousness, nervous system, is really something you would measure to see evolution. As you go up the tree, there's more consciousness, not more genes. And that what we're really coming to understand is this, is that consciousness started with the first organisms on this planet. Consciousness is still here with us as far as we are. But until we integrate consciousness in an eco world, and ecosophy, is that, how do you pronounce your wonderful term?
Ecosophy.
Well, my dear friend, Elisabet has a whole understanding about this coming together now. Why? Evolution is not competition. If we don't learn to live in harmony, A, with each other, and B, with this beautiful planet that we had until we sort of desecrated it, that's our evolution. And the two things that I would say we really need to understand is, number one, we live in a quantum world. Everything is energy. Because we used to live in a Newtonian world where matter and energy were separated, and human bodies were made out of matter, and energy was irrelevant. And energy is what? Is consciousness and spirituality. We threw it out of science, but quantum physics brings it back. And quantum physics really says that consciousness is creating our life experiences. And that if this experience isn't really good, it's don't change the world, come back in here and change this consciousness. That's number one. And number two, to recognize something I didn't know for 40 plus years, spirituality. It actually exists. In the quantum physics, we call it a field. Oh, that sounds technical, but field is the same definition as spirit. And when we understand we are spiritual entities that are immortal, and that we have consciousness as our creator, and you put those together, then this place can go back into the garden. And this is what Mother Earth is asking us to do, to stop, because we are killing ourselves. and my dear friend Elisabet, of course, it's all about how the coming together and creating this community. So I'm going to let that wonderful lady say something and be quiet for a minute.
Hey, Bruce, you're so on target there. Of course, I like to use the metaphor of a keyboard for the cosmos, for us, and as individuals, for any superorganism. And what I mean by that is both the standard model physics and quantum physics, which hasn't been able to unite its with each other, but they both agree that the universe is made of vibrations. And if you think about a sequence of vibrations, think about a keyboard, an endless keyboard. And some of you have seen my metaphor of the keyboard, where matter is in the low keys, the slow vibrations, and then you move up into energy. And then Einstein showed us that matter and energy are the same thing, so you can transpose the music up and down that far. But then on beyond energy, you get into 0 point energy, and then you get into mind, consciousness, spirit, all those high keys that Western science, by its own definition of reality, that things have to be measurable with physical instruments, can't reach that end of the keyboard. Now, the other sciences like Vedic science, Taoism, indigenous science, they start up at the high end of the keyboard rather than deriving consciousness from the matter end as Western science does. They derive matter from the consciousness end simply by slowing down the vibrations. Now, that's an oversimplified kind of metaphor, but it works because you see that the problem with it was that we took those things apart, that we separated science and spirituality, rather than seeing that the whole keyboard moves from what we call, material to spiritual. So there is no separation. And we are all mind, body, spirits, not bodies with minds. Now, going back to Darwin, of course, he was doing his best at his time, and he got pretty maligned afterwards. It was actually Herbert Spencer that used the survival of the fittest kind of nature red in tooth and claw kind of model. But what I've been most interested in is this difference between the youthful mode of fierce competition. It's a very creative time, the youthful mode, as we know from our human experience. Things go in holarchies. We're embedded, nature is always entities embedded within larger entities, and we ourselves go through a maturation process. So I came to see that youthful mode of competition and then the mature mode of complete cooperation, interdependence as a maturation cycle. And that's exactly what we're going through right now, is that we're moving. Many indigenous cultures learned this long ago and became cooperative with other surrounding tribes nearby and so forth. But never before has humanity been challenged to do this as a global level. If you want to call that superorganism, that's fine. But technically, a superorganism is simply a networking of colonies of smaller units. And we have now got some mainstream evolution biologists finally catching up with us, Bruce. We've got David Sloan Wilson, our own David Sloan Wilson, who's done this wonderful work on evolution where you start out at the very beginning selecting individuals, and then as soon as individuals start forming little cooperatives, nature starts selecting for the most harmonious cooperatives, right? So, and then we've got Tamsin Woolley Barker, the author of Teeming, spelled Teeming, who points out that there are only 6 true social species in all evolution. 4 of them y'all know as the insects, the ants, the termites, the bees, and what's the 4th one? The wasps, four insect termites. And who live by the millions in their communities and have divisions of labor and complex societies and stuff. That's 4. We're the 6th one. Can anybody guess what the 5th one is? You're not going to like it. It's another mammalian species. It's blind mole rats who underground live by the millions in complex organized societies. So it's a little bit embarrassing that we can't do better than mole rats, but it's our turn and we've got to come together now. This is our time. And we're in turmoil, as Bruce pointed out, for several reasons. One, we've wrecked so many ecosystems that we're in danger of killing off every survival base we have for our own human species to survive. If we let the oceans die, we're cooked. And nature will start all over again with the microbial world that we're finally learning to respect. It's taken us 30 years to get that almost all bacteria are not only benign, but that we can't live without them. There's no multi-celled creatures that doesn't have far more bacteria running its immune system, making its vitamins, doing all these things for it. And now we're going through this with viruses, where we've got this huge fear factor around one little virus that was probably manufactured in a lab. And it's apparently okay to say that again now, after a year and a half of being told, no, don't even go there. And Fauci's being caught up in a few lies about the NIH not funding the Wuhan lab, when all the medical articles where they jointly wrote papers about gain of function and all that, they're all there available in the medical journals from before this all began. So we're in a strange situation. We've got Neil deGrasse Tyson at the Museum of Natural History going all weird and woolly about anti-science and saying the most unscientific things himself. not allowed to talk about UFOs apparently as anything real. So it's a wild and woolly and wonderful time, because in nature, crisis has always provided the best opportunities for sudden dramatic change. And for humans, as far as I can see, nations are very artificial entities. It's humans scratched lines right through cultures on the ground, paying no attention to watersheds or anything else, to say this is a nation and this is a nation. And that's why we have all these difficulties with nations. But cities, if the cities grew up from small villages to big cities, they are natural entities, as natural as a nucleated cell that forms then multi-celled creatures, right? So our cities around the world are starting to come together. There are these organizations of mayors from all over the world, and the cities aren't holding standing armies. They're not into warfare. They're into figuring out how to cooperate. And just as in our bodies, you pointed out that the brain isn't in charge and the genes aren't in charge. The brain is a clearinghouse for information. It absorbs information and sends back information, and this constant centralized democracy kind of situation in the body. So we have to do this as a network of cities. Now, you can't build a city overnight, as they're doing in the Middle East and in China. You build an infrastructure and throw a whole bunch of unrelated people in it. Guaranteed failure will happen very quickly. It'll turn into a massive, messy slum. Like it'll break down, it'll disintegrate like a caterpillar, the people, if not the buildings. But if the city has grown naturally from probably a trading center, and then networked with other cities, and then turned into empires, we had to go through, just as nucleated cells, when they were new on the planet, went back into youthful mode of competition before they matured into building their new multi-celled creatures. So the same thing is happening with humans, that we built the cities as cooperatives, and then the cities did start to compete with each other during this whole phase of empire building. And now we're at the end of empires ruled by emperors, then national empires, now corporate empires. We're at the end of all that, and we have to do a distributive networking. We've built an internet that shows how that works. It's interesting that we came to that importance of the most resilience is when you have no part of it destroyed will kill it off. That's a true superorganism. And so we're learning from that. We've built this internet, and we're getting it that we now can come together as cities and all of their environments that support them. I just did an interesting consult with the Emirates about building Dubai 2040. They have no sense of climate change. It's not on their agenda at all. And I'm saying, you guys better green your mountains because you have to go uphill. 13 of the 20 biggest cities in the world are at sea level. And they're going to have to move. And only Jakarta so far gets it, that moving uphill is part of the agenda. We're not going to stop this. And it's not going to happen in slow, predictable curves that we'd like. It's going to go in fits and starts. The skirt ice around, let's say, Greenland melts off, then all the other ice that we know is already lubricated by these tunnels of water, shafts of water at the interface, that can all slide off all of a sudden, and you get a couple of meters overnight after the tsunami, several meters high sea level. So we have to get proactive, no choice. And you can see that I can talk as much as Bruce can talk. So shall we let in some of the others and get some questions here so that
let me just add something while we're here for a second, because competition is a very important word to understand evolution. But the competition that we look at today is unfortunately a competition based on winners and losers. You win, you lose. You win, you lose. Yeah. Original definition of competition was to strive together. And you go, what do you mean? I go, look, if you're a tennis player, obviously I'm not, but if you were a tennis player, for example, and you wanted to improve your game, you don't play against people that are less capable than you. You have to go against people that are more evolved in that game. And why? Because it makes your game better. So the competition isn't after the tennis game, you lose, you get shot. No, basically, you should get better with each of these, trials in the competition. So it's really working together as competition, but to improve each other. It's not a winner-loser game. And then lastly, it's very important because Elisabet just mentioned the word caterpillar. So I'd like to just close with a simple analogy, which is really what we're experiencing right now, and that is this. Caterpillars, let's say monarch caterpillars for monarch butterfly. Caterpillars are one of the most voracious organisms on this planet. You put a caterpillar on a plant, it'll eat every damn leaf off that plant as much as it could. I have a milkweed where they lay their eggs, and then like in 3 days, all the leaves are gone. They ate all of them. Then I say, what do they do? And they go into a cocoon. Okay, and I go, well, wait, what's going on? And I say, back up. A caterpillar, any plant and animal that we can really see with our eyes, is actually a community of cells. A caterpillar has millions of cells, and they work in a community where all cells have different jobs in harmony. And I go, so why is it relevant? I said, when the caterpillar is growing, all the cells are working, man. The digestive system cells, the muscle cells, are all cooperating, creating this livelihood for the caterpillar. But then there's a point where it slows down and stops. The caterpillar stops moving, stops eating. And I go, what? Well, now it's wrapping itself in a cocoon. I say, put yourself into that cellular body. And here everybody was working, economy was great, and all of a sudden there's a slowdown. And cells are now out of work. There's no movement. No, I don't need these muscle cells, no digestion. I don't need these digestive cells. And all of a sudden, the breakdown of the community occurs. And the breakdown of the community turns into a soup, more or less, inside that cocoon. I say, well, then what's happening? I say, as the caterpillar community is breaking down, there's a new community being formed by what we refer to as imaginal cells with a new vision. And the new vision is the butterfly, the lightest touch on this planet compared to the caterpillar, the most voracious. And I say, so what's happening in a cocoon? I say, chaos. And chaos is not random. Chaos has pattern, but you don't see it. And I say, well, what's the pattern? One community breaking down, one community simultaneously being built up. Well, we're in that world right now. The chaos we see is it's not working, and that we had to change. And the COVID situation really pushed people, and some of these jobs are not coming back and all that. And it says we cannot continue to live this way. So I say, then what? I say, well, imaginal cells are there, my dear friend Elisabet is imaginal cells. The evolutionary leaders represent imaginal cells. And I say, what are they doing? They're saying there's a better vision. You step outside the box. Don't stay inside the box and fight the box, because they have more power than you. And if you put your power against their power, that neutralizes, you lost your power, you didn't go anywhere. So all of us are here today to do what? Let's don't focus on the one coming down, because that's just scary as anything. If you're part of that, oh, it's falling down. I go, yeah, I know. Thank goodness it is, because if it doesn't fall down, extinction is looming in decades. And so I say, yeah, but while it's falling down, I don't have to hold on to the scary part. I go, no, come together as we're doing in this week here with, Source of Synergy. Thank you, Deborah and Diane, for getting us here. And I say, what? Build a new community outside of that box. Don't put your energy to fight something you're going to lose all your energy. Energy is life. And so why are we here? And we're here because there's a plan. There's an understanding of how we can evolve into the version of a butterfly civilization with the lightest touch on this planet, where we can thrive here. And it's all based on really new science, because the old science was science of limitation. And now we have the science of an opportunity to create beyond anything we could ever imagine. And this is the beautiful part about evolution. It's a creation process, and we are individually creators. Now, we're either creating a mess, which we weren't doing, or the call today is to come together and create something that is in harmony, sustainable, community garden. And this is our directive at this time.
And we got to cultivate our garden of beliefs in order to do it. And you're so right. Rigid structures can't be changed. We need to break down in order to go on.